Hey guys, and welcome to the Because Maybe podcast, the podcast that takes a look at all things 90s and answers some of the most important questions of the decade. Because maybe, if you want to be my lover, don't get with my friends. That's kind of wrong, kind of weird. I'm your host, John Connolly. Thank you, whoever you are, wherever you are, for taking the time out of your day to listen to this podcast. We have a great show ahead of you. We have this week's Cultural Impact, where we take another look at Britpop, and we go behind the music and look at 4 of the biggest albums during the Britpop era. And we also have a special tribute to one musical icon who was sadly taken away from us in the early 90s, and an announcement that I will make at the end of the show. If you guys want to support this podcast, why don't you follow us on social media? All of our links are in the description of the podcast. You can tap on them, click on them, whatever it is that you do. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Google Plus for all you Google listeners out there. We're trying to be everywhere. We're trying to build our audience as best we can, and I can't thank you guys enough. Again, you've outstripped my expectations in how many people have listened, how many people have downloaded, and again, from the bottom of my heart, I really want to thank everybody. It sounds like I'm a little rushed to do this part. Kind of am. Not because it's Tuesday night and I'm trying to get this podcast out tomorrow and I'm rushing. No, it's nothing to do with that. This bit will be short anyway because we have a lot to talk about this week, and we have a very good discussion, me and my wife. She is a Britpop connoisseur just like myself. She loves all things British, and this was a natural to bring her in. But I wanted to talk, before we moved on to this week, I wanted to talk about last week. Last week, you guys gave me the most feedback I'd had on a specific episode and a specific topic. I want to thank every single person who answered the question this week. I thought it was going to be more controversial than it actually was. I was expecting people to go, yes, of course, it's Britpop too. And fortunately for me, I was right. Britpop and Radiohead are not bedfellows. Isn't that fantastic? You don't believe me? Let's ask Storm. Storm said, hell no. What about Sarah Jane? Wikipedia says no. Adrian says, Britpop is a construct? Yes, but musically? No. Patrick with a simple no. Gavin says misery pop. Matt says absolutely definitely not. You cannot define them as any genre either. Unique? Maybe, but never Britpop. And Gareth replied with absolutely not. So I thank everybody for getting back, and thank you for agreeing with me. That's the most consensus I've ever had since I was voted least funniest in school. Also, Kat, again, thank you once again, Kat, for taking the time. I know how busy you guys are. Thank you for listening. Thank you for once again feeding back with us. And you replied about Radiohead. It's British and it's popular, but I wouldn't classify it as Britpop. We always thought of them as alternative. Fair point. Kat would go on to say, so the definition of Britpop is not at all what mine is. I guess it's an American thing. To me, the bands that made up the majority of our list were considered a mixture of alternative and just plain rock, at least in the circle of friends. When I heard Britpop, I automatically thought of the Spice Girls. And this is something we're going to touch upon next week, but again, I want to clarify, just absolutely clarify. When I'm talking about Britpop, I'm talking about the genre of music rather than the term that was thrown to any popular British act in the mid to late 90s, because there is a subtle difference. One of them, as I mentioned, is based around rock acts, pop acts who came from working class areas and formed in a certain way and wrote songs about a certain way. And the Spice Girls and Radiohead, and as I mentioned, the Manic Street Preachers don't follow in that format. So guys, thank you once again for taking the time and give me the feedback that I needed, and also proving me right, which again, as I mentioned before, is a very rare occurrence in my life. You can ask the wife, as you can tell by the conversation that we're about to have. But guys, if you have anything that you want to request, any episode requests, anything that you want to plug yourself, anything that you want to give me that you don't necessarily feel talking about in quote-unquote public is what you're looking for, shoot me an email, becausemaybe@gmail.com. I will read your email. I will gladly reply to you personally, and we'll go ahead from there. I also want to thank everybody who's been reading our blogs the last couple of weeks. We had one on Damon Albarn last week. This week we have one on Jarvis Cocker. I guess you don't need to be a rocket surgeon to figure out which personalities we're going to be talking about on the next blog. But before that happens, we've got another blog coming out, and I'll get to that later on in the show. So, for now, I take you over to the dynamic duo, and that's me and my wife, and we're going to have a conversation about the 4 biggest albums of Britpop.
Cultural impact.
This week, Cultural Impact, we take a second look at the Britpop scene. This week, we're going to look at 4 of perhaps the best albums of the Britpop era, and I'm delighted to say I am joined by the person who is the one keeping me sane, even though I'm driving her insane, my wife, Miss Sarah Connolly. Sarah, how are you?
I am wonderful. How are you, dear?
I am doing good. Thank you for taking the time out of your hectic schedule. And when I say hectic schedule, guys, I mean a real hectic schedule, to kind of talk about one of the biggest music scenes in modern history.
Oh, you wouldn't have been able to keep me away from this one.
Now, for a little bit of a background, we kind of met through our mutual love of certain bands and certain artists, and I could think of nobody better who could sit down and tell me that I'm wrong in life and in this part of the world to begin with. So,
we're a very opinionated family.
We are very opinionated, and but it is good to have Sarah on board. Sarah's actually been helping a lot. Sarah is our wonderful blog writer, so any spelling mistakes, don't send them my way, send them my way.
Yes, okay. No, spelling mistakes in regards to blogs, send them my way. Spelling mistakes in regards to social media posts, oh, that's all on John.
That is all on me because, yeah. But it is great to have you on the board, and so let's dive right into it. We've got 4 albums that we're going to be talking about today.
Okay.
What's the Story, Morning Glory by Oasis, A Different Class by Pulp, Parklife by Blur, and Urban Hymns by the Verve.
Yes.
Now, would you agree that when you consider Britpop, those are 4 of the biggest albums you would think of? Or at least some of the biggest albums you would think of?
Yeah, I mean, they're the top 4 that would come to the mind of most. Yes.
And the fact that, as well, that 5 of the guys in these bands were the main faces of the movement of the scene.
Right.
So we will kick off, and I'm going to move our notes around just a little bit.
Ooh, shaking it up, aren't we?
We're going to shake it up right away, and we're going to talk about Urban Hymns by the Verve.
Yes.
And this, as most people don't know, is the Verve's 3rd album.
Yes.
Sold over 5 million copies and was released on the 29th of September 1997.
Yes.
That's actually a couple of friends' birthdays of mine, believe it or not. Richard Ashcroft was the main songwriter of the Verve. How do you think he did lyric-wise?
Well, lyrically, I mean, Ashcroft has always been a brilliant lyricist, and Noel Gallagher has gone on record many a time. I mean, if you look at Some Might Say, which was written, if I'm not mistaken, about Ashcroft.
Cast No Shadow.
Cast No Shadow. Excuse me. See, we're very opinionated, but we were able to be corrected in our family. It's wonderful.
Richard Ashcroft was not itching in the kitchen with his dog. And yeah.
Yes. Okay. I would like to interject that I have been battling the flu for over a month, so I'm on cold meds.
That's a fair point. If last week I can get Tia Correa's name wrong at 9 o'clock in the morning,
yes,
you can battle on cold meds.
Yes.
So 2 weeks in a row. But Richard Ashcroft, lyricist. I mean, he was. You could say he was the best lyricist in the Britpop era, would you not?
That's fair. That's fair.
He's in the argument at least. He's a strong front runner.
Yes,
you could say. He wrote very simple arrangements for this album, and in other cases wrote real bombastic, out of the box arrangements. I mean, you listen to something like Sonnet, right? Great song. The Drugs Don't Work. Great song. But they're very simplistic. And yes, while he used the sample in Bittersweet Symphony, he still had to write the arrangement and everything around that.
Yes.
And so, the fact that they got back together to release an album to begin with is astounding. Because if you remember, they split up in between 95 and 97. And due to infighting, and Richard Ashcroft believed that he couldn't do another album with another group of musicians outside of the Verve.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you're in a band, that's your family. And so even when you want to, smash them upside the head with a guitar once in a while, they're still your family, and that's who you record with. Unless you're the Gallagher brothers, but that's a whole different
And we
story.
will get to that here in a little while here in a minute. But I mean, well, one of the things we spoke about in the first episode was kind of filling in spaces. You know, I mentioned how grunge filled in when Freddie Mercury passed and when Kurt Cobain passed. You had not grunge, but Britpop itself filling in. Would you say that in 1997, after Be Here Now had kind of flopped, after Blur had walked away, Pulp were in the studio working on their next album, which would deviate from the Britpop sound. Do you think that the Verve kind of stepped in there and filled a void that was starting to form in the movement?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a fair statement. I mean, here's the thing. There were a ton of fans that were, I don't want to say trained, but we had our ears fine-tuned for a certain sound.
Predispositioned.
Right. This was our jam. And so all the makers of our jam had sort of popped off wherever they went. And so here comes, here comes these guys on the scene. And for those of us in the U.S. at least, TRL or whatever you happen to be listening to, all of a sudden you get this big, instrumental, the violins from Bittersweet Symphony that are so iconic, popping up. And then there's these guys and, oh, look, oh, they're accented and, oh, they have the same haircuts and, oh, it sounds just, yes. So, that they definitely were primed to fill a hole that the other bands had left wide open. And they did so brilliantly.
And they did so brilliantly, as we'll get to here in a second. But you mentioned Bittersweet Symphony. Mm-hmm. The controversy that surrounds that.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know, the Verve had agreed to a 6-note sample of a Rolling Stones song.
Yes.
And they used 12 notes.
I think that's it. Yes.
It's the whole string sequence. Do, 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 all that stuff. And that's 12 notes, not the 6. And they went to court because of that. And Keith Richards and Mick Jagger took 100% of the royalties.
Yes, because Keith Richards and Mick Jagger need your money.
Yeah, they do. Well, Mick does. He's got all that child support.
Well, yeah. Mick, because right around then he was still, yeah.
He was still Jerry Hall, wasn't he?
Yeah, and then, Jerry Hall was pregnant and around that time, and then there was the woman in South America, and yeah, I mean,
Mick didn't need the money. No, he didn't need the money.
Yeah, Mick's, yeah.
That's probably why they're still on tour today. But to be fair to Keith Richards,
right,
the man who will outlive us all.
Yes, Keith Richards, Cher, and cockroaches. Those are the things that will survive the apocalypse.
And, that's not too far away. Basically, but Keith Richards has come out and said they wrote the song, they should get the rights to it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they wrote 12 notes of a song.
I don't mean, let me rephrase that. Sorry. Keith Richards said that the Verve wrote the song, they should get...
yes.
I mean, they should get some credit for it. It's kind of like a couple of months ago, it was a couple of years ago, Tom Petty and his songwriter for Sam Smith. Yeah. Yes. They didn't want necessarily all credit on over the song and all the royalties. They just wanted, hey.
That wasn't Petty. That was Petty's songwriting partners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Tom Petty was a big
follower Petty even went on record and said that, it's just one of those things. I mean, people wanted to stand up for their portion of the pie, whatever that is. So,
all of the tracks, this is one of the few albums of the Britpop era, and I'm including the 3 that are on this list that we're going to be talking, the other 3 that were on the list, where all 12 tracks were solid. I mean, and what I mean by that is they were all on the same level. Any one of those 12, aside from
singles.
Yeah, aside from the 3 we used, could have been singles and big smashes. Now, a lot of the other albums, you couldn't pick songs off and go, that's a smash, that's a smash, that's a smash. And we'll get to that here when we talk about Morning Glory.
Okay.
But it was that's what made it a good album. It was very, very solid and stout throughout.
Right.
The songs that were written during the session that didn't make it to B-sides actually became the spine of Richard Ashcroft's solo album.
Yes,
So
I remember that solo album.
Song for the Lovers, great song.
Yes,
That might have been on this album.
that could have been on that album.
So I'm thinking the 3 songs that I know of Richard Ashcroft's solo album: Money to Burn, Song for the Lovers, and Come On People, We're Making It Now.
Right.
Any of those 3, do you think it would improve the album, or do you think it would detract if it had to replace something?
Song for the Lovers definitely could have been on there. But I mean, here's the thing: it's how much awesome do you need to put in one record?
True. But I'm a big believer if you've got the awesome, you put it on there.
Yeah, but then you end up, releasing things like Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, which...
That's a fair point. That is a fair point.
I mean, at some point, there's only so much stuff you can put on an album.
That's true. That is true.
That's why you have box sets like 50 years later.
Right. This, out of the 4 albums we're going to be talking about, this was one of the 2 that completely and utterly smashed America.
Right.
Which was unusual for a Britpop band in the sense that it became a big hit. Now, I know that the British bands came into America and, they were well known, but this album smashed it.
Well, yeah, and that was led with Bittersweet Symphony.
Yeah, I think that was a great choice for a single.
Well, yeah, because any of the others, I mean, here's the thing. You had your Britpop diehards here in the U.S., like myself and a lot of my friends. But you would be hard-pressed to just go up to your average American, music fan. I mean, take myself. I mean, I'm 36. And... an American female in the southern part of the United States.
Yes.
Right? So if you were to just go around and ask, my contemporaries, go find ladies who lunch. Go around and ask my contemporaries to name an Oasis song. And they probably could.
Wonderwall, probably.
Champagne Supernova was big here. So
and Morning Glory itself, too.
Yeah. So, they can name you an Oasis song. Blur, they can name, they would probably go, Woohoo?
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah, that Woohoo song. And that would probably be, right? But that would probably be the only one that they would know off the top of their head. The Verve, they could probably tell you, Bittersweet Symphony.
Bittersweet Symphony was on the soundtrack to Cruel Intentions too, so that didn't hurt it.
You're right, that helped. And also it's been used in a couple of commercials as well. Did Nike use it?
I think so.
And I know AT&T used All Around the World for Oasis.
Yeah, AT&T probably AT&T used everything that they get their hands on.
Well, yeah. But I said all that to say, ask an American female or ask a Southern American person, 9 times out of 10, name another Britpop person. They're not going to tell you Suede. They have no clue. They're not even going to be able to name you a Pulp song.
No, and that's a travesty in my opinion.
Right. But if you say Britpop, they're going to bust out and tell you the Spice Girls.
Yes, and as we discussed last week, that is not correct.
Yeah,
we'll get to that next week.
But yes, be prepared to be entertained by a high-powered debate on this one.
Indignant Sarah is the best Sarah, I have to tell you guys.
I'm awesome to ride around with when I have road rage, because I yell a lot and flay my hands around like a crazy person. But no, I mean, the Verve, as far as Oasis were known for 1 or 2 songs and fighting amongst each other. Not even drugs here were they weren't known for that here. They were known for fighting.
Yeah.
And, for a couple of songs. But as far as a British rock, Britpop artist, the only ones that were known specifically for their sound and as a solid band would fall around with the Verve. That would pretty much be.
And the irony of that is that the Verve did as much drugs and as much infighting as Oasis ever did. Which is the, they had as much
shenaniganery. Yes, but the National
Enquirer
Enquirer did not pick up on that.
True, that is true.
I mean, this was pre-TMZ, and if the Enquirer or the Globe didn't tell you, you didn't know.
So when is Dr. Phil getting divorced?
When indeed.
But you make a good point about that, and I just want to not clarify what you say, but add on to what you say.
Right.
Is that you are right. I mean, the British bands that came over here, which we'll talk about next week, that got the big exposure, was more for their antics than the music, which is, in my opinion, is a shame.
Right.
But at the same time, the music that did come through was was what you'd expect, because it was just as the same
Right.
bigness over both sides of the Atlantic. So, the rating for this album, in my opinion, is a solid 9 out of 10.
I'll give you that.
9 out of 10. The best tracks, or the most notable tracks, Bittersweet Symphony,
Mm-hmm.
The Drugs Don't Work,
Yes.
and Sonnet.
Yes.
Would you say that any other tracks? Would you go with something like Lucky Man, or...
Lucky Man's good. I know the drugs don't work. I mean, okay, that is a testament to the power of Richard Ashcroft's, songwriting. The man literally made a song, a love song, about, how drug use won't help him get over his lady. So, I mean,
If only
it's, I know where you're going with that. Stop. But,
Justine.
from Alaska. Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. There's a.
That's being cut.
No, there's an Easter egg for. I tell you what, if somebody can name what that's from, right? Hit us up on social media. If someone could get that reference that John just made, you get like 1,000,010 brownie points, dude. Because we are some pop culture junkies, and we quote some obscure-ish around our house. So, yeah, but, no, I mean, anybody who could make drug use sound sexy,
Yeah.
that's, and it's so not, but, I mean, that's just a testament to the power of him as a songwriter.
So that's it for the Verve right now. We are now going to take a journey down south to everybody's favourite non-cockneys, everybody's favourite working-class, middle-class heroes, Blur. And we start talking about their third album, Parklife.
Yes.
2.5 million copies sold.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised by that number. Considering how big the singles were and how much they were talked about, it didn't even sell as much as the Verve Urban Hymns, even though it was released several years later. Just... It's weird to me because everybody talks about Blur, 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 especially in that era.
Blur is very much a singles band, though.
That is true.
Blur,
that
because here's the thing. I mean, Blur... All right, let me back up. America buys albums.
Correct.
Well, now in the digital age, that might be changed. But back in the day, America bought albums. We didn't really buy singles. Singles weren't our jam. So...
Don't you do charts by plays on the radio, as opposed to actual hard copies of?
Well, it's all inclusive because it's known that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a mesh, right?
Radio play in the UK meant nothing.
Right. Over here, radio is part of what gets you charted.
Okay.
So, but America is was very at the time album based.
Yes.
Whereas Blur is a very singles based band. I mean, wasn't it Noel Gallagher that came around later that said he never bought a Verve album, but if they ever put out a box set of just singles, he'd be the first person in line to buy it?
A Verve album or a Blur album?
I'm sorry, a Blur album. Guys, remember, this is Sarah on
Cold Medicine.
Cold Medicine.
Yes, I know.
So, but I mean, because Blur are very much
Yeah, and I can agree with that.
A singles band. I mean, the rest take their singles off an album. Take Parklife.
Yeah, as we'll get to in a second, I mean, Parklife as an album, I think was a very, very good album, and we'll get to why I think it was good here in a minute. It was released in April of '94,
right?
And unlike the Verve album, which was mainly guitar-based with a little bit of piano and a little bit of, I don't want to say psychedelia because that's a bad word to use, but I'm trying to think of the word and I can't think of the word, but it did have very, very haunting sound to a lot of its guitars, and very effects-based.
Right.
This used more synthesizers, Hammond organ, saxophones, guitars.
Woo-hoo. Yes.
Exactly. Graham Coxon, fantastic saxophonist, believe it or not. Damon Albarn played some guitar on here, but that was he mainly played the keys. I thought he was a very, very underrated guitarist as a rhythm player, but anything other than rhythm, he just couldn't do. Well,
and we've spoken before. I mean, Damon... You have to give Damon more credit where credit's due, because at the end of the day, once you put Britpop to bed, right? Internationally, Damon beat everybody.
He did.
I mean, look at the Gorillaz. And they're in the Guinness Book of Records as the world's best-selling virtual band, and whatever virtual band means to you, but
I don't think there's too many.
Right. I mean, but take the little cool-looking cartoon dudes aside. The cartoon guys wouldn't have gone as far as they did if there wasn't solid music backing it up.
No, and that's true. And this is the thing I guess Damon Albarn did after, in between the breakup and reformation of Blur,
Right.
is he put more of his own personal music out there, if that makes sense. A lot of these songwriters, as we mentioned with the Verve, a lot of the songs were made, didn't make it onto the Verve album, but they made it onto the Richard Ashcroft solo album.
Right.
Noel Gallagher was infamous for saying that he had like 5 or 6 shoeboxes full of material that
He had a shoebox done.
he had his shoebox done. And after, I'll get to that here in a minute. But so yeah, he got more of his own personal stuff that I don't say the Blue fans wouldn't have accepted, but it would have been too different even for Blue.
Maybe.
And
yeah.
so, the Gorillaz came out. I think one of the things about the Gorillaz is while you could tell it was Damon Albarn singing, it came out at just the right time in that early 2002, 2003.
Well, yeah, but and the Gorillaz also have, a huge Hewitt influence on them as well.
Exactly, and it's not just Damon Albarn in this. I think he transitioned more into, I don't say producer, but kind of, this is my album with like 100 other guest musicians on it, and I'm not going to take
Right.
we're going to put focus, like I said last week when it came to, certain actors, they were looking more at the characters rather than the big star behind it, I think.
Gotcha.
It was rushed recording because Blue's record label, after Modern Life is rubbish, which the only adjective I can use to describe is
Rubbish.
I thought it was a good album, but it's possibly their weakest. The band wanted a little bit of time to go in the studio and work at it.
Right.
But unfortunately, after the poor sales, Food Records were about to drop them.
Asking ye not receive.
So they rushed that recording and, believe it or not, pulled it out. It's got more energy than any of their other releases, including Leisure, which was very, very energetic.
That is something that you Brit people, really, really, you Brit people, listen to me. That is something that you Brit people do really, really well. Give you guys studio time and a deadline, and you guys can crank out, look at the early Beatle albums.
True.
Which it was, what was it, Please Please Me? Yeah, that was done in 12 hours, the entire album, start to finish.
The Help album.
Yeah, but Please Please Me was 12 hours start to finish in one studio, because that's all they had.
Yeah.
Boom, that's it.
But then again, recording was different back then. You basically recorded jams back then.
Yeah,
but still 12
but
hours
still.
is a good thing.
So, you give you little British people.
I'm patting my head
What
right
do you
now.
mean, you people? Yeah, but, you give...
They did that. They did that. A lot of, we mentioned I mentioned the Help album a minute ago. For
Right.
those of you who don't know, the Help album was a charity album. It was released in '95,
I think so, yes.
and it featured 20 tracks that were recorded on Monday, mixed on Tuesday, pressed and mastered on Wednesday, sent out to the record stores on Thursday.
Yeah, I think that Lin-Manuel Miranda strives to be the people who did that.
He wants to be Britpop.
Or no, people who put together stuff like that. Because, even with this Puerto Rico stuff, he went from there was a storm, and then 24 hours later he's got a song, and then he's flying all over the country to get snippets from people. So, yeah,
The bane of my sleep, let me tell you. That's another story for another day. A lot of this album was written by Damon Albarn in third person. He transposed his personal lyrics onto different characters and different scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Listening back, could you tell he was kind of talking about himself in a lot of the things?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's,
Because I couldn't tell if he was talking about himself or if he was talking about people he knew and then making them into characters and so on and so forth. He admitted, for example, in the next album Blur did, which I will not speak of because it is a waste of vinyl. I don't care what anybody says, it's a dreadful album. He a lot of the songs he wrote about himself, but gave them to different characters. So, the album is good, but it does have, unlike the Verve album, it does have its wobbles.
Okay.
There are a couple of tracks that really you could take out and not just string.
Everything that's not a single, yes.
Well, not necessarily, because there were some songs that weren't singles that were very, very good, like Tracy Jacks.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very good song. Bad Head is a good song, but you could do without Lot 105, which is the goofy instrumental at the end. Fun song, but after you have This Is a Lull, which is a really, really big anthematic song, then you get this cheesy instrumental at the end of it.
Right.
it was a critically acclaimed album, and it was considered the first mainstream Britpop album, regardless of what came before it and who came before it. This is considered, bang, this is Britpop.
I can see that.
And unlike the Verve and unlike Oasis, who we'll talk to in a minute, this did not break any other major international markets.
Right.
This is a very, very European album, and more specifically, a very, very English album.
It is quite the English album, yes.
Notice I say English, not British, because
Yes.
I can't think of Scotsmen worrying about, feeding the pigeons and the sparrows.
Huh.
And us Welsh don't care about civil service. 7 out of 10? Fair?
Fair. Yeah, fair. That's fair.
Notable tracks, obviously, Girls and Boys.
Yes.
Absolute banger of a song, as the kids say. End of the Century,
Right?
which, great song, but in 1999 Britain, Damon made a lot of money off that song. Especially between October and January.
Yes, that is, that's Damon's 1999.
Yeah, it was nothing special. Parklife, great song. Phil Daniels,
Yes.
the wonderful Phil Daniels, also known as Jimmy,
Yes.
as far as I'm concerned. And I mentioned This Is a Low. Great, great song. Very, very rock song. And perhaps the most English song on the album. Because who else could take a dramatic tune and write lyrics about the shipping forecast? If you don't know what the shipping forecast is, just ask an Englishman. They'll tell you what the shipping forecast is. We will bounce around.
Yes, we're very bouncy today.
We're very bouncy. I had a specific order, and I figured the way I wrote it was not the best, so we tweaked the order. That's what we do.
Yes.
Very, very spontaneous. We go to
Brrrr.
Pulp,
Bing!
A Different Class.
Okay.
Their 5th album.
Yes.
The 2nd album that broke mainstream music.
And with this, I'm going to touch back again on the fact that this is Pulp. Okay. I adore Pulp. Jarvis is freaking amazing. But Pulp is another one of those that, unless you were just really hip and cool, you didn't know about
Correct.
here.
I'd say the same thing in the UK too.
Yeah, but at least they were on the radio over there.
True.
Like, here's the thing. I never heard Pulp. Like, I mean, I may have heard a snippet of a song here or there on a soundtrack or in the background of something, maybe. But I had really, I knew of them. But it wasn't until 1999 when I was visiting some friends of mine out in California. And we went to this awesome little resale shop, CD resale shop, because that's what we did back then, kids, called Fingertips in Long Beach. And so I went there and I had funds, and I'm like, look, because Ned is just a music connoisseur god. I mean, I know he's put a lot of his stuff digitally, but back then he had walls and walls of CDs and cases under his bed of CDs. And now he's a music writer, which, you'd figure that's a natural progression.
Yeah.
But Ned is the bomb. So I walk into this place with Ned and I'm like, point me. What albums can I not afford to live without? And, blessedly for myself, he definitely introduced me to Pulp. So, Pulp's one of those where Pulp is definitely part of the Britpop movement, but they are definitely on the British end,
The far British end.
Right, because, and this is another thing we'll discuss next week, but Britpop, the perception of Britpop in the UK versus the perception of Britpop in the US are entirely two different things.
Right.
That's just, yeah.
That's just what it is.
Right, so I adore Pulp, but I'm going to let you run with this one.
True, because, Pulp, we mentioned Pulp are very, very unknown in the United States. Jarvis is the ultimate hipster.
Oh, God, yes.
He is king hipster of Hipster Town. Just the tweed suits and the NHS glasses and the fact that he looks, Sacha Baron Cohen, his LEG character, said that he looked like a child molester. It's just... and then proceeded to do the best parody of any song I've ever heard in my life, the Help the Aged parody.
Yes.
To be honest, I've only listened to this album a few times.
Okay.
It's a very, very good album, but you are kind of right in the sense that it's a very, very singles-heavy album. Now, they only released 3. Like the Verve, any of those songs could have been singles.
Right.
But the only 3 that are remembered are Common People, Disco 2000, and Something's Changed.
Right.
It's a good album. In fact, it's a great album. It's absolutely critically acclaimed, considered to be possibly the best album of the era. It's also the epitome. It's very, very British. It's very, very, Common People. Common People. You've heard me sing that and play that so many times.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Common People talks about, British perception of their working class by some rich foreign type. And it's again, it's a story, it's embellished on, but it's a really, really good song, and it does, hone in on what a lot of working class Brits felt like at the time, and even now, that your life's out of control, there's nothing you can really do about it, and this is how we live, and
it's also very relatable, though. I mean, yes, it's very British, but it's also, it's relatable to anybody who's known and lived with the struggle.
It's the ultimate poor/working class anthem.
Right, because, and over here, if you're American and listening to this, and you haven't really, been introduced to Pulp, if you've ever had the struggle, growing up poor or working class, or wondering, if you've got enough food to put on the table, or the place that you're renting, the apartment, trailer, or whatever, is crap, and it's just funky, and you're struggling again. Then here walks in somebody, with money and heirs who thinks that they can just join in wherever you are.
Yes,
that's which is the basis of the song, but it's so relatable.
Definitely. It's it strikes a chord with me a lot,
right?
Because I did grow up in similar environment,
right? Yes.
And it just everything he wrote, not just Common People, but everything he wrote was ultimately relatable to the kids and to the people who listen to it.
Right.
In my opinion, it is a shame that Pulp were around at the same time as Oasis and Blue, because they would have been so much bigger. They were big in Britain, but they could have been so much bigger if they weren't not overshadowed, but the antics of the Gallagher brothers and the sniping by Blur, and
to make that statement fair, you would need to say that it would have been better for Pulp if they had released this album and This Is Hardcore and whatnot earlier, because Pulp were around long before.
Yeah,
Pulp were active in 85.
Yep. And it just took him a long while to do that, and I think Jarvis went back to college to get his degrees and stuff like that. But again, it's just great band, great album, absolutely fantastic. Struck a chord with a lot of people correctly. Jarvis Cocker was this weird blend. Jarvis Cocker was an enigma, in for lack of a better term.
Yes, he's this tall, pasty pale, skinny guy with gigantic glasses, and
he looks like Harry Potter's uncle.
Yes, but sings like this awesome British Barry White type. Barry White mixed with Frank Sinatra. I adore him.
And of course, 95% of Pulp songs are about sex.
Well, yes.
Jarvis is the ultimate king of writing a song about how he wants to get laid. That's
yes. But no, just and to touch back on Common People one more time. If you can't tell, I really like that song.
Yes.
It's just, if you've ever been frustrated when somebody who seems to have been born and come from everything, like daddy's taking care of this and da-da-da-da-da, and they, or, somebody who's got all of their stuff taken care of, but wants to tell you about how hard life is.
Correct.
Oh.
Yeah, I hate those people.
Yes. This is definitely, yeah.
And the people who've crawled out of that through a combination of luck and timing, and when people are trying to do the same thing, and you get told 100 stories about, how they had like $10 to their name and a beat-up car, and now they're a multi-trillionaire, and because they had the right time to,
Right.
It's just, yeah.
Well, no, those stories I like, but
Well,
it's
I like
okay.
them too, but when they look down on your story.
Oh yeah.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, when somebody's condescending and you're just like, look at her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a 9 out of 10 album.
Yes.
It is definitely a 9 out of 10 album. But unlike the other albums that we're talking about today, this was a UK-only album.
Yes.
That didn't even break anything in any other countries. I mean...
Well, yeah, because like you said, Pulp is very Brit-centric.
Yeah. I mean, even, it struggled in Ireland even, which I would, I'm surprised by that because it was a big hit in Wales. And the thing I can say about the Irish being Welsh is that they are our more famous cousins, for lack of a better term. And we share a lot of ideals, shall we say. And I'm surprised it didn't take off there as much as, say, some of the other albums did. So we come to the final album that we're going to be talking about.
Yay!
And this is another reason why I put it on list, because I know this album more than the others.
Yes.
And this is where you hear
Me too.
where you hear Mr. and Mrs. Connolly get into an argument.
Yes.
What's the Story? Morning Glory by Oasis. Oasis' second album.
Yes.
24 million copies.
If you were American, it's a high chance that this is the album that introduced you to Oasis.
Correct. Considered possibly the greatest album by a UK band in that era. Certainly the biggest selling. It selling 24 million copies was the largest selling album by a British band or artist in the 90s.
Yes.
Strangely enough, this is considered a masterpiece by a lot of critics and a lot of fans. When it came down the pike, the reviews were mixed. NME, 3 out of 10. Q, 2 stars. The two biggest music magazines in the UK, and just, they weren't feeling it. Now, at the time, of course, the NME was completely had their nose right up blue. That was just...
Well, I mean,
that
okay.
next week.
Yeah, that and... Are we covering the rivalry next week?
We are going to be covering a lot of the rivalry next week.
Okay.
Because that dominated the peak.
Right, because in it... I told you guys, leave this in here. I told you guys, Hamilton, everywhere. You'll have to listen to outtakes for that. Anyway. Yes. Okay, so, here's the thing. How much of that, though? Yes, reviews were mixed, and a lot of the main British press outlets were, anti What's the Story, Morning Glory. But how much of that was them pushing back with, and as much as I love my boys, the Gallagher's attitude at the time? Because if somebody comes in there swaggering, they already had some success.
True.
With Definitely Maybe. And so they come in and they're like, here, this is my opus. Yeah, and you suck. If you don't think this is the best thing you've ever heard in your entire life, you're stupid and you suck and, whatever. And so there's going to be a lot of people who are just going to be like, on principle.
True. I mean...
until they've listened to it.
And that's true. And going to what Sarah said, a lot of book recommendation for any Oasis fan that doesn't have it, I recommend the book Getting High by Paula Hewitt.
Yes.
That covers a lot of this stuff. And in fact, a lot of my research on Oasis came from that book. Yeah, you're right. I mean, not only am we saying this is the best, this is the best, this is the best. On the counterpoint, though, you could kind of see where the reviewers were coming from. Because you had...
they based it off of, She's Electric and...
Possibly. And the failed Glastonbury set, because the Glastonbury set sucked. Oasis headlined Glastonbury in 95. Mark Hall was the engineer who was going deaf.
Right.
And they had to set up the sound as they were doing the sound check. They did the sound check as their very first song on the thing, the Swamp Song, the instrumental. And
I'm not a fan of the Swamp Song.
True. Interesting fact.
There are some people that are.
I like it.
I'm not a fan.
It's because of those two little snippets that are in Morning Glory that kind of cuts it up. But they went from having this punky sounding rock sound with Tony Carroll's drumming and very, very rocking energy to the first track having electronica and Alan White, as much as I love as a drummer. Possibly,
Whitey is the bomb.
The best of his generation.
Right.
His drumming style was completely different and more of a funky R&B jazzy style. And then you tack that onto a rock band, and while it helped create the unique sound, you could see why the first couple of listens you're not used to, simple, basic drum beats. That's why some might say stands out like a sore thumb when you listen through the album.
Yeah, I can see that.
But you are right in a way that, the arrogance and the...
Turned people off.
Yeah, turned a lot of people off. Because they were telling this anybody who would listen.
I mean, this is... back then, and I think, okay, here's the thing. They're never going to grow out of that.
No.
You know, God bless them with confidence out the yin yang, right? They're never going to grow out of it. But I will say that as they've gotten older, Noel and Liam have become a lot more refined in how they dole that out.
Well, Noel just says, look, aren't I great? And Liam will call you a potato.
Yes, right, right. But back then, I mean, Noel would be like, look, you know, I just dropped this chewing gum wrapper on the ground. Isn't this the best chewing gum wrapper in the history of chewing gum wrappers? Why aren't you down here worshiping my chewing gum wrapper? I mean, this is
to
who
be
they
fair,
were.
he's still like that, though.
He is, but he's not as much in your face about it.
No, whereas Liam...
I mean, you know, now he'll just look at you like, we both know
Yeah.
that's the best. But you know what? You do you. That's where Noel's at now.
And Liam is still Bart Simpson banging on the cans. Ain't not great. Everybody loves me.
Yeah, Liam, you know...
Now, with the reviews, they did get better in the weeks ahead. Like the Enemy and Hugh did re-review the album, especially after listening to head-to-head Oasis, Morning Glory, and Blues Great Escape. They listened to them back to back, and kind of the opinion flipped. You know, everybody said that the Great Escape was the greatest album of all time, and subsequent listens, it's dreadful, and I agree with that. I'm sorry, any Blue fans who are listening, I'm sorry. The Great Escape was a dreadful album. And if you can tell me why it's a great album, I will listen, but it's not. Doesn't mean I don't like Blur. As I mentioned last week, I love Blur. I love 13. I thought Parklife was fantastic. The Great Escape, not so much.
Look at his chewing gum wrapper. Isn't it the greatest
chewing gum wrapper? It is the greatest chewing gum wrapper.
You'll never convince him that his chewing gum wrapper is not the greatest. I will touch one thing before we move forward. To me, well, it's not as much to me because, you know, of course, I'm a huge Oasis fan.
Yes.
And I'm married to you.
Of course.
So, and this is one thing that we will touch on in upcoming weeks, just in general. The UK is very festival based.
Correct.
And that didn't really happen for us. Of course, now, you know, we have Coachella. That's
South
really...
by Southwest.
Huh?
South by Southwest.
South by Southwest, yes. But up until, not saying that music festivals didn't happen, but up until like 94 when they redid Woodstock, that was not really a thing here. So, I mean, you know, it wasn't as much of a scene. And so the concept for Americans of somebody basing an album on a performance judging a whole album based on a performance at a music festival, you know, we all kind of do the confused puppy dog.
That's true, but then again, that's been the British music press MO, and especially when it comes to Oasis.
Right.
I think if Oasis was smart, or the Gallagher brothers were smart, they would never play Glastonbury ever again. They played it in 94, and they were like on one of the smaller stages, because they hadn't made it yet. I mean, definitely maybe hadn't been released yet, and the singles hadn't broken the top 10. They were getting there, but it wasn't warranted a bigger stage spot. They headlined in 95 and 2004. Mm-hmm. Both the performances in 95 and 2004 were absolutely ridiculed by the British music press, and whatever new material was played was absolutely laughed away. You had Morning Glory was laughed away. Don't Look Back in Anger was laughed away.
Right.
Some might say. They broke out some of the older B-sides. I say older B-sides, you know, the ones from the McCarroll era, It's Good to Be Free, The Head Shrinker, and so on, to kind of patch the set up because it just didn't look like it was going right. And then in 2004, when they played Glastonbury, they played A Bell Will Ring, I think it's called.
Yes.
I love that song, I'm sorry. And The Meaning of Soul. Not their best songs off that album that came out, Don't Believe the Truth, that came out a year later, but they still got Savage for it.
Right.
So I think Glastonbury is kind of if you're established act releasing new material, the lesson is, don't preview a whole bunch of new material at Glastonbury, you'll get Savage for it.
That, and if you're in a band and get invited to Glasto, bring your freaking A game.
Yeah, definitely.
Reading or Glasto, bring your freaking A game. Okay. We got sidetracked because,
sorry.
Yeah.
But that's good, that's good. This album kind of helped bring out more of the guitar scene in the UK.
Yes.
It needed a spark. It needed something to shine a light on the guitarists that were in the UK at the time. And I think this was this can be pointed as the spark.
This could also be, the whole thing where the Beatle comparison came in.
Yeah,
Because back in the 60s when the Beatles came in, they were told guitar bands were on the way out.
exactly.
And Oasis were told the same thing.
Pretty much.
Now, granted, because of Gallagher's Gallagher, and I love them. I love all of them. But, this is...
It's the Irish inside. You tell an Irishman they can't, that something's going wrong, and
they're going to do it perfectly just to spite.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This led to... This album was the basis of... Basically the backbone of Oasis, the backbone of what the Britpop scene was in 95 to 96, and it led to Nebworth Park. Like the Spike Island gig, like I mentioned last week, the apex of a movement, not the best gig that the band ever did, but just the moment was there.
Yes.
I mean, Oasis fans, look, I'm one of you guys, I love Oasis, you know that, but in my opinion, Oasis' best gigs were Main Road in 1996.
I still have my Main Road t-shirt.
You do?
I do, it's in the closet.
And believe it or not, this one, Glasgow, 2001, at the Barrowland.
Glasgow, okay.
That's a small little intimate gig that they did just after the Brotherly Love tour.
Yes.
It was, it was just like a 10-year, the 10 years of Noise and Confusion tour. I thought that was their best gig, and the biggest gig in terms of what was great was Main Road rather than Nebworth.
Right.
It did...
Ha! That was his phone! Ha! Don't get this.
I'll cut you off one out too. We'll call it one off. Okay? All right.
He'll cut what he wants.
That's right. It's my podcast now. I'm
what
producer.
He wants.
Anyway, this album was not the start of the Cool Britannia scene, but it definitely was the spark that kind of set it ablaze and made everybody...
Well, it made Oasis synonymous with Britpop, at least internationally.
Yes. And nationally too.
And okay. But I know internationally, I mean, you've got Noel and his Union Jack guitar, and there's and even in our gossip rags, he and his wife, or I think they were just dating at the time, Meg. But he and Meg are vacationing with Kate Moss, who was, if there was a model that defined the 90s, she was up there. And her boyfriend at the time, Johnny Depp.
Yep.
So, I mean, you've got, Oasis became the face of that, of Britpop and Cool Britannia.
Yeah. And I agree they completely were. They took, they made the Union Jack a kind of, I suppose what to say, they made it kind of a fashion statement as opposed to...
Well, yeah, until Jerry Halliwell came out with it, bedazzled and with their...
Yeah. That was kind of, We'll talk about the Spice Girls next week.
I love the Spice Girls.
I know you do. The album itself. Let's go back to the album itself, because we talked a lot about we've talked a lot around, and the only thing we haven't talked about is the album. And in my humble opinion, for the first 4 out of the first 6 songs on What's the Story, Morning Glory, I can honestly agree with the critics. I can see why it was given a so-so review rather than the euphoric one that people associate with it.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah.
Roll with it.
Yep.
Hey Now.
Yep.
And that instrumental, you cut it off, and you replace it with Acquiesce.
Right.
Underneath the Sky.
Yep.
Round Our Way.
Yep.
The Master Plan.
With you.
You take She's Electric off. You take that second instrumental.
You don't take...
You take She's Electric.
No.
Sorry. In my opinion, you got to take She's Electric off, and you add the B-sides that came from the Master Plan era, and boom, that album.
I need my silly though. I mean, here's the thing. That was the one thing, we're bigger than the Beatles. That was the most Beatles sounding song on the entire album.
True. I mean, it was. It's a very good song.
It is.
It is Noel Gallagher's best.
It's my happy bounce around song.
It's his best use of metaphor.
Well, I mean, also that album, Noel was still very much in his Dr. Seuss lyric stage.
Yes.
Then.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of the songs on the album, and we are going to go through this with the bigger review of Morning Glory that we do in a couple of months.
Right.
And a lot of the songs were one verse, one chorus.
Right.
Hey, let's repeat it because it sounded so great the first time.
Yeah.
Roll with it. Wonderwall. Hey Now. Cast No Shadow. Morning Glory. Champagne Supernova. All of them had one verse, one chorus. A couple of them had a second verse, but that first verse got repeated again and repeated again and repeated again.
Right.
Again, it's a strong album, but it's not Oasis' best work, in my opinion.
I'll agree with you, but we both disagree on what was their best work.
What's their best work?
I would say Saltzog.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, a couple of years ago on Facebook, I wrote I was one of the 12 people who like Be Here Now. I finally have found the person who likes Standing on the Shoulder of Giants. And I can see, no, but the thing is, I can see where you're coming from. I can absolutely see where you're coming from.
The thing about it is about Saltzog is, and of course, that's a whole nother, we could do, and I don't even think that technically falls. That was what, 2000?
It was 2000. But the first singles were released in January, so I'm giving it a pass.
Well, yeah, but it was leaked in 99.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean,
The demos that Bonehead leaked.
Was it? No, it was Whitey.
Yeah, Whitey leaked the demos.
Yes.
Apparently, let me
Okay,
get my legalese.
allegedly.
Allegedly, the great Alan White released the demos.
Yes.
And the demos for the Heathen Chemistry that came out.
Yes.
And when that was found out, Liam kicked him out the band.
Supposedly.
Allegedly. Now, that's probably not true,
If
but
you have your ear to the ground and,
yeah, if you have your ear to
listen
the
to
ground,
the
no, because nobody knows why Alan White left Oasis, and that's one thing I need to know. I need that closure. Bonehead left because he was done after
Bonehead wanted to go spend time with his kid, man.
Bonehead wanted to spend some time with his kid, and there's also stories of partially because of the no alcohol rule, and he got into a big argument with Noel about it and left. Gwigsy left because, well, Bonehead and Gwigsy were joined at the hip, for lack of a better term. And to be fair to
Gwigsy needed quiet.
Gwigsy was the least comfortable with the fame and everything.
Yeah.
He wanted to go home.
Yeah.
And wanted to be anonymous again. And to be fair, he's stayed completely out of the spotlight.
God bless him.
But Whitey, man, great drummer. And in my opinion, part of the reason why Oasis's albums from Be Here Now through to Heathen Chemistry didn't resonate as well as they maybe should have. Because of his drumming style. Not that he's a bad drummer. That's not what I'm saying. But his style, he drummed one way, just like McCarroll only drummed one way. And some of the different ways that Oasis tried to put beats down were different. But again, that's another story for another time.
Yeah, we'll compare all these later.
Worldwide smash hit album.
I mean, to this day, KT Tunstall, and J.K. Rowling have both gone on record and said that, Wonderwall is like a national anthem in the UK. So, it's God Save the Queen and Wonderwall.
I'll be completely honest, I'm not a fan of one.
Blaspheme.
Let me rephrase that.
You shall not blaspheme.
If you ask me my top 10 favorite Oasis songs, Wonderwall isn't there. Yeah, I know. And with all due respect to your opinion, I think this last year has proven that the unofficial national anthem of Great Britain is Don't Look Back in It. Which is the greatest song that Noel Gallagher ever wrote, in my humble opinion. Other notable tracks were Wonderwall, Some Might Say, which featured the most goofiest lyrics that Noel ever wrote.
Again, this was the Dr. Seuss era. The sink is full of fishes.
Yeah.
She's got dirty dishes on the brain.
And you can't defend that as a terrible, terrible lyric. But literally 20 seconds before that, he said, "Some might say you don't believe in heaven. Well, tell that to the man that lives in hell." I think that's a fantastic lyric. That's probably one of the best he ever wrote.
Right.
And a minute later, fishes, dishes. Okay,
Well, I mean, sometimes I think it was just a case of, he's had all these songs in his head. And, he had these wonderful one or two lines. And the rest of it, it's Noel being Noel.
Yes.
And these lines are so great that they'll carry the rest of it.
Maybe.
I mean,
and that's a good way to think about it. My opinion, 6 out of 10. Your opinion?
See, critically or emotionally, because this album
Personally,
is
when Sarah listens to this album, does Sarah think this is a great album, a crap album, or a so-so album? For me, it's 6 out of 10.
This is a great album.
Okay.
Because, I mean, this album for me started it all. I mean, I didn't realize that I had heard Oasis before. I had heard Live Forever partially on the radio before and didn't realize it. But you know, I'll never forget the first time that I saw Wonderwall on MTV.
True.
You know, listen, kids, that's back when MTV used to play music videos, but...
Music
they brought
television.
TRL Bot back.
They did.
Yes.
They did. I might have to talk about TRL one time.
Okay. But, yeah, I mean, that album is so iconic for me.
True.
And that represents just so much of my
musical
coming of age.
And I know you had a lot of other things too,
So,
with
yeah.
you know, with the girl acts, as you call them.
Yes.
But to me, I guess I don't want to use the whole word being British, but I mean, how many times has Morning Glory been? How many times has Wonderwall's been on the jukebox? How many times has Wonderwall been played at the pub or at the karaoke? Or Wonderwall, to me,
Wonderwall is your Sweet Home Alabama.
Yeah, we just can't get away from it, no matter how hard we try. And it's just been overplayed and overplayed and overplayed and overplayed and overplayed and overplayed. And it's just to the point now where, you know, I can't listen to it as much anymore because I've heard it so many times. But the rest of the songs around it, like I said, the second half of that album is iconic. The first half of that album, you only have 2 great songs, and it's brought down. Right. And that's why I think it's only 6 out of 10. These 4 albums are considered the best work of the major players of the scene. Do you agree with that?
Yes. Well, I mean, I can see where some would say that, yes.
Okay. They're also, not only that, but they're also considered some of the better albums that British music has released in the past 30 years.
I don't agree with that.
Really?
We'll have to continue this discussion later.
We'll continue that next week. In my opinion, Morning Glory is not Oasis' best work. There's too many flaws. Not as good as their debut. And as a whole, probably the best album, the second best album they did, but as far as original material, Don't Believe the Truth, Dig Out Your Soul, The Master Plan, they all have better individual songs. Right. So, you know, Parklife. Shangri-La. Parklife, great album, but do you agree that it's not Blue's best work?
Correct.
Okay. In my opinion, as I mentioned before, Parklife's a great album, but Blue is the best album that Blue released.
Yes. I'm in total accord with you there.
And Pulp and the Verve, unfortunately, this was their peak.
No,
not
Pulp.
Verve?
The Verve, yes, not Pulp.
Not Pulp.
This is hardcore.
This is hardcore was...
I mean, this is hardcore for me, anyway. I mean, you look at Pulp, and you've got those, you know, the main 3 notable tracks being Common People, Something's Changed, and Disco 2000. I mean, which was Pulp's 1999. But this is hardcore is full from beginning to end of just awesomeness.
So, I mean, that's basically it. I mean, you know, we this has been a great conversation. I thank you for sharing it with me. Thank you for bringing me great debate and some great stuff that will probably not make it air. But because of this week's social media question is revolving around these 4 albums.
Okay.
This week, I have to ask, which one of these 4 is the best album of Britpop?
Ooh.
It's a tough one. It is a tough one because, like most things in Britain, it's very, very tribal. You have your Blur fans, you have your Oasis fans, your Pulp fans, and your Verve fans, and they can't agree on anything. So I'm asking you guys this.
Fundamentally, can't agree on anything.
Right. So, which was the best album? Morning Glory, Parklife, Urban Hymns, or Different Class? We have our social media websites. Go to any of them, Because Maybe Podcast on Facebook, Because Maybe Pod on Twitter and Tumblr, and just tell us which was the best album.
Tell us.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your absolutely hectic schedule to come and shoot the breeze with us for about an hour or so. We look forward to speaking again next week, where we go into the final part of our history of Britpop.
Yes.
But for now, see you then.
Bye.
Freddie Mercury was the phenomenal singer of Queen.
He had the voice of a god. He could sing in many ranges.
4-octave range.
4 octaves.
He was a great pianist.
But he didn't think so.
He was a flamboyant showman.
Completely known for his performances.
He once performed with the Royal Ballet.
Carried around by shirtless male ballerinas. He was also an accomplished artist.
He designed the band's Royal Crest logo, which incorporated every member's zodiac sign.
His singing style ranged from rock and pop to opera and classical.
In the 80s, he started getting sick and started appearing less and less.
Deathly ill, and 6 weeks before he died.
He recorded The Show Must Go On
In one take.
only one take.
In 1991, he announced that he had AIDS.
The next day, he was dead.
The world of music had lost a hero.
Freddie Mercury, the ultimate legend.
Perhaps the greatest singer of all time. He will always be missed.
Okay, that's almost this week, guys. I know we've gone through a lot this episode, and we've just got a little bit more before we call it a day. If you guys are on social media, Facebook, go to Because Maybe Podcast, Twitter and Tumblr, go to Because Maybe Pod. Just look us up. That way you'll find out, what's coming up soon, some news, the usual things you find on these social media websites. And as mentioned, they were moderated by both myself and my wife, and we are looking for people who know more about how to use Facebook to kind of help us along. If you have any ideas, go to your email and type in becausemaybe.podcast@gmail.com and send me an email, and I will pick your brains if you've got the time to let me do that. This week's social media question, just like last week, it is a simple question. Which was the best album of Britpop out of the 4 that we've covered? Was it Morning Glory, Parklife, A Different Class, or Urban Hymns? You hear our opinions, now I'd love to hear yours. Next week, we are going to have our final part of our 3-week Britpop. It's going to be basically the peak and the downfall, and a spirited debate about the merits of the Spice Girls, by the sounds of things, as well as just a couple of, the American point of view. I know a lot of my audience is split between both sides of the pond, kind of like my life right now. But I've been saying it from a British point of view, where everything happened. I'm looking forward to hearing Sarah explain how it was perceived in the United States. And finally, before we go, I didn't want to, I mentioned this earlier, and I didn't want to leave this hanging. This year, I am proud to announce that I will be taking part in the annual Movember. I have done this for a couple of years, and I've always donated what I could, and I plan on doing the same thing this year. I'm personally donating $25, and I know some people say only $25, but $25. I'm hoping to, with your guys' help, to get those donations up to $100. Now again, it doesn't sound like much, but every nickel helps. This is important to me from a personal point of view. I don't want to get too personal and too gross, but I am 33 years old, and I have twice in my life had scares when it's come to, let's not beat around the bush, whenever it's come to cancer, I have had 2 scares in my lifetime. Once, ironically, was on the same day as something really, really bad happened to my dad, and once was a couple of years ago. And both times I got the all clear. Both times I was panicked and then completely and utterly relieved. But it's important to me because, that kind of thing frightens me, especially since I've had a couple of scares. Also, this kind of men's health isn't really as talked about as much as a lot of others. The Movember Foundation also, aside from growing the mustache, which a lot of people think is gimmicky, it does send a lot of money to research for testicular and prostate cancer, and also men's mental health, which is nowhere near talked about in society as it should be. You hear soccer players in the UK, you hear football players over here, professional athletes, and it's just not talked about because a lot of people seem to think just because you have a shit ton of money that you should be happy all the time. And, money doesn't buy happiness. It doesn't. Although it is, it is better to be on the side of the road crying into a Mercedes than it is into a broken down Lada. But, humans are humans, no matter how rich you are, no matter how poor you are. The thing about these diseases is that they don't discriminate. They don't discriminate against race. They don't discriminate against age, religion, sexuality. If you're going to get them, you'll get them. And that's a sobering thought. So to me, as far as I'm concerned, I'd like to do whatever I can to help eradicate these from the world as much as I could. So like I said, but I will be personally pledging $25 to the charity. And I encourage everybody who's listening, if you are male, related to somebody who is male, or are in love with somebody who is male, make sure that they look after themselves. Make sure that they're taken care of, because this can be ignored very, very quickly, and it can overtake you very, very quickly. So what I will be doing is I will be on October 31st on Halloween. I will be transforming my face into a potato. I will be shaving off what facial hair I have now, and then I will be growing just this magnificent, beautiful, non-creepy looking mustache. And, you know, I encourage all the guys who are listening to do exactly the same. If you are capable of growing facial hair and you have a spare $10, get involved. It's a worthy cause, and it's something that I personally will ultimately respect you for a long, long time. So, yeah. So, like I said, every week I'll post a new picture of the old push broom, and it'll be fun. It'll be a nice way to to raise awareness and raise money. Because, again, you know, we've had things over the last couple of years like the Ice Bucket Challenge, and a lot of people didn't, a lot of people poured water over their heads and didn't put a nickel into the fund. And I just want to make sure that, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. And I encourage and I hope everybody joins me. I'll be putting everything that I've just said down in text form. I'll upload the blog tomorrow or the next day, and with more information on how you can join my team, but how you can donate and so on and so forth, and how we can move forward. So that is it for this week, guys. Thank you very much, and I look forward to talking at you all next week. Shut the bathroom door! Thank you!